So good afternoon and welcome to the second day of the webinar, Soil Organic Carbon Assessment and Management towards the creation of carbon financing mechanism. Yesterday, we introduced the soil organic carbon topic and heard about the Exact tool and the REC soil program. Today, we will talk about carbon markets, verified carbon standards, carbon financing mechanism, and carbon-rich soil amendments. Before passing the floor to the first speaker of the day, let's understand your level of confidence on the topic through a few questions that I will ask you in the form of polls, a bit like we did yesterday. So let me launch the first poll. Okay, you should see now on screen the first question is, do you know what carbon financing mechanisms are? Yes, no, or you heard about it, but you don't exactly know what they are or how they work. If you can't read the full text, please just enlarge the window and you will be able to read the full sentence. I will close the poll in a few seconds. Please, Harry, to tell us if you already know about carbon financing mechanism or not. Okay, I'm ending the poll now. So the majority heard about carbon financing mechanism, but do not exactly know what they are or how they work. Still, there is a good portion of you that do not know about it. Let me ask you now for a second question. The question is the following. Do you think that carbon financing mechanisms can effectively help halting soil degradation and mitigate adapt to climate change? Yes, no, maybe, but not in the way they are currently managed, or maybe, but you don't know enough about them to express an opinion. I will close the poll shortly. Please, Harry, to answer the question. Do you think that carbon financing mechanisms can effectively help halting soil degradation and mitigate or adapt to climate change? I'm ending the poll now. Okay, promising answers. The majority said yes. And of course, because the first answer was about your level of knowledge on carbon financing mechanism, and many of you said that they are not confident with the topic, well, many people still are not able to express an opinion about it. Now, ready for the third question. It's the following. Do you think that carbon financing mechanisms can boost investments in agriculture? Yes, no, maybe, but not in the way they are currently managed, or maybe, but you don't know enough about them to express an opinion. Okay, I'm ending the poll now. Yes, the majority said yes. Now a last question for you. What do you think are the main obstacles to the establishment of carbon financing mechanism? For example, the complexity and uncertainty about regulatory frameworks, methodologies, and future market conditions, the lack of legal and policy frameworks, verification and monitoring that was briefly touched on yesterday. So when we talk about the MRV, project cost that can be high, particularly for small projects, access to finance, maybe the risk for reversals where stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere, the lower the risk for adverse social and environmental impacts, or other. You can express more than one preference. Maybe you have 2 or 3 opinions on this. I will close the poll soon. Please, Harry, to share your opinion on the topic. Okay, I'm closing the poll now. So the majority said that main obstacles refer to the complexity and uncertainty about regulatory frameworks, methodologies, and future market conditions. But we also have some doubts maybe on verification and monitoring systems, and again, legal and policy, the lack of legal and policy frameworks to support the topic. Sorry, I forgot to share. Okay, now you should see it on screen. Many thanks for breaking the ice. So it's very good for us and for the speakers to have this background information so that maybe we can tailor a bit the presentations and the discussion based on your level of knowledge and confidence on the topic. Now I will stop sharing and I will pass the floor to the first speaker of the day, that is Mr. Bo Damon, Natural Resource Officer, working at the FAO Office for Asia and the Pacific, that will introduce us to carbon markets for agricultural sectors. Bo, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lucrecia, and good afternoon, morning, everybody. What I will do is maybe help with some of your uncertainties regarding carbon markets, not all of them, definitely, but what I will do is talk a little bit about some of the work that FAO has been doing on carbon markets and for agriculture sectors, particularly understanding the levels of readiness of our member countries in the region based on past and now ongoing developments in carbon markets, both compliance and voluntary. This has come about actually because I think there is, in the last, just to look at member country interest in the topic over the past 10 years, I think if we were to go back 10 years, there was a very strong emphasis from our member countries that action on climate change needs to focus primarily and almost exclusively on adaptation and building resilience. And what we've seen, I think, since the initiation of the Paris Agreement in 2015, the development of the nationally determined contributions at country level, and also transparency systems around the Paris Agreement, there has been a growing interest from countries and a better understanding of the potential for mitigation action in the agriculture sectors as well. And so that is part of what's driving the interest in carbon markets, I think, in the region, particularly for the agricultural sectors. And that's what's basically motivating our work. Looking at quickly in the broader context, you know, the latest IPCC reports, there's a mounting body of evidence indicating that climate change is already impacting on the agricultural sectors, that it is having a significant impact on the productivity of the agricultural sectors. And it has not been, if it was not for previous investments in agricultural research and development and strengthening infrastructure around the agricultural production systems, that we would have seen considerable potential losses across the region and also globally in agricultural output. In terms of productivity, it is being affected, of course, by climate change. And if we're going to be able to address future, potentially even greater impacts of climate change, then investment is required now. And that corresponds with the Paris Agreement. Now, the Paris Agreement, just to briefly start laying some of the foundations for how carbon markets comes into the work that we do. The Paris Agreement lays out a number of different mechanisms to help countries chart out the potential contributions that they would like to make in terms of reducing emissions, both as part of the Paris Agreement commitment period out to 2030, but also into the longer term. So what we've seen is renewed interest from many countries across the region and globally to develop long-term strategies for low emission development. And this is looking at how, for example, countries may be able to become net zero in greenhouse gas emissions over the medium to long term, or to undertake significant reductions in emissions both during and post the Paris Agreement commitment period. So there's a very good complementary relationship between the NDCs that underpin many of the climate actions that are being identified at the country level and these LTS as they're known. There's also in the Paris Agreement provision for financing mechanisms, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, particularly in Article 6, with respect to a continuation or an evolution of the clean development mechanism, so allowing countries to take even more ambitious action to support other countries or to work with other countries to trade verified emission offsets. And this is Article 6 is basically the foundations of what we would call the compliance market. And then also underpinning all of this to ensure that that action that is committed to is undertaken. There is a transparency framework, the enhanced transparency framework under Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. And this is part of this is a mechanism to provide certainty to countries who are party to the Paris Agreement that the other parties to the agreement are undertaking action in good faith, that they are being transparent about the types of actions that they're undertaking, the outcomes of those actions in terms of mitigation or emissions reduction potential and opportunity, also other elements of what they're doing, for example, adaptation, providing or using climate finance, and also capacity needs that they may have in terms of better accessing climate finance, such as the carbon market. So this is sort of the institutional foundation underpinning the Paris Agreement. And from a conceptual point of view, what are we talking about when we're talking about carbon offsets or the carbon market? We'll use a net zero example. This isn't the only example we could use, but you may be aware or you may have heard that countries are committing, for example, to become net zero by a certain time in the future. A number of private companies are also committing to net zero targets. And basically what they're doing is they're making a commitment either to reduce their total greenhouse gas emissions from within their boundaries. So it could be an organization's boundary or a country boundary. So they're looking to reduce emissions or to increase carbon sinks or greenhouse gas emission sinks. And any difference to also look at opportunities to purchase or exchange emissions offsets so that in total, the emissions across the economy or across the company are equal to or less than zero. So conceptually, relatively straightforward, but in practice can be more complicated. In the agricultural sectors, we know of a number of different technologies or approaches that could be adopted to either reduce or sequester emissions in the agricultural landscape. Particularly well known is activities in the forestry sector. So protection of forests, improved management or restoration of forests. Increasingly, we're seeing more interest as well in emissions reduction or sequestration opportunities in agriculture specifically. So reducing emissions from livestock or improvements in manure management, rice cultivation, but also sequestering emissions. And this is where soils in particular have received more and more attention. Of course, another opportunity would be to look at how we may reduce demand. So avoiding emissions through reducing demand for maybe reducing food loss and waste, or also improving cook stoves, for example. And these options technically relatively well understood, and the potential for the application of these types of approaches has been assessed and quantified across the region and also globally. This graph here is basically just showing cost-effective mitigation opportunities across all of those options that I just presented. Unsurprisingly, largest opportunities tend to be in larger countries, of course. So this is just more an indication of the relative size of the country, but it does also show some differentiation, for example, where options to either sequester or reduce emissions may lie. And you can see that in some countries in particular, say China, India, a lot of potential here to look at sequestration opportunities in agriculture. And then relative compared to the size of the country or the economy, of course, there are lots of opportunities across the region as well. But again, this is technical opportunities, not necessarily feasible economic opportunities. Now, moving to the carbon market. So the carbon market is one way to to support action, to support these types of activities, to provide resources, and also to receive recognition for the emissions reduction or sequestration opportunities they provide through either through the compliance market in the national systems in the NDCs, or through the voluntary carbon market. So purchasing of of offsets to promote these types of actions globally and across the region. If we're to think about the sources of supply for carbon credits, there's international crediting mechanisms. In the past, of course, a clean development mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol, under Paris, now the Article 6.4 mechanism. There's also regional, national, and subnational crediting mechanisms. So these are emissions trading schemes, such as the California Compliance Offset Program. There are a number of domestic ETS, either under development or already operating in the region. And then there's independent crediting mechanisms. So the voluntary carbon standard, gold standard, the voluntary carbon market. And then these serve at different market segments. So the international compliance market. So purchases aim to help countries achieve NDC targets, or help airlines comply with their own mitigation targets under CORSIA. There's domestic compliance markets. So offsets are traded within emissions trading schemes at national or regional levels. There's also results-based finance. This commonly refers to what we would know as REDD+, but there are other types of results-based finance as well. These typically are not necessarily traded in compliance markets or in voluntary market, but they do represent a type of emissions reduction as well as then the voluntary carbon market. So this is specific purchases of offsets meeting the standards of the voluntary carbon market systems and the different crediting mechanisms there. Now, recently there has been a lot of movement, a lot of evolution and development within the compliance market, particularly at COP26. There was more certainty regarding the future of the Article 6 mechanisms, the compliance market. And negotiations have not finalized on this topic. They're still ongoing, but after COP26, there was increased certainty regarding how the different crediting mechanisms relate to each other and how they could be used, different use cases. So not to go into too much detail, but Article 6.4 is a compliance market mechanism, offsets developed through specific projects meeting the standards of the Article 6.4 compliance mechanism. It basically, at the moment, there's an assumption that what was the CDM in the past would transition to some extent into this new Article 6.4 mechanism, and that credits purchased through Article 6.4 would have some resemblance to the CDM mechanism of the past. Under Article 6.2, there's also an opportunity for countries to trade at what they call internationally traded mitigation obligations at the sector level. So this is an agreement between countries for a host country to produce emissions reductions that are then authorized and traded to a buying country that can then help them increase their emissions reductions and help them meet their NDC targets, as an example. And then the voluntary carbon market, voluntary emission reductions, And then you can see that each of these different mechanisms contribute to different types of use cases, whether that's voluntary reductions, which could be for a person or a company, also results-based finance outcomes, also potentially for contributing as well to NDC contributions. I suppose just one thing to note here, OMGE, which is something that comes up a lot. I think sometimes there is questions regarding whether offsets actually can lead to an overall reduction in emissions, which is actually the longer term goal that we are looking at. OMGE is a concept that at some point there's an overall mitigation of global emissions. So there's at the global level, there would be an actual reduction. And the idea here is that some of these credits would be retired completely, so that would represent an actual reduction at the global level of emissions, not simply just a trading and offsetting. As I mentioned, there are a number of different carbon adjustment mechanisms and taxes and trading schemes across the globe. And these developments continue. So we're seeing a lot of development, either development of domestic compliance markets through ETS or implementation of carbon taxes, or some type of blend of these different schemes. In this region, there are already a number of schemes under consideration or carbon taxes implemented. So a growing number of examples of potential use cases in the region where emissions offset programs could feed directly into international or regional trading schemes. Where are these offsets generally coming from at the moment? In the past, the Clean Development Mechanism was, probably the largest segment. There was a lull in activity, potentially as well with respect to uncertainty regarding the transition into the Paris Agreement. Now what we're seeing is that there's been increased growth in voluntary carbon market issuances, so they represent the majority. You can see here just a brief breakdown of the different voluntary carbon market mechanisms, who are the largest players or the largest volume of issuances, where are they coming from, which standard. One other thing to note, particularly when we're talking about agricultural land use sectors, is that not all credits are equal. This is an older figure from a report back in 2019, but what it does help illustrate is that different types of offsets developed with different methodologies targeting different sectors can achieve different types of prices. So you can see here, if you look at, say, emissions reduction here for red-based activities over on the left-hand side, you have an average price at that time of around $3.7 or $3.8. If you look at some of at the other end of the spectrum, some of these different types of credits targeting more innovative sectors, these are generally sectors or activities where there are not a lot of issuance of credits at the moment. So they are relatively innovative. You can see that in some cases they were achieving a much higher average price for that emissions reduction or sequestration opportunity. And that sort of trend continues today, where for example you see recently a lot of interest in say sequestration credits through biochar, which have been, a lot of the price expectation around credits with that type of approach have the expectation is quite high. Some people saying as much as $100 per ton of CO2 equivalent sequestered. So just something to keep in mind, that not all credits are equal in the carbon markets, and that different types of activities may attract more interest because of the nature of the emissions reduction or the sequestration opportunity they're targeting. And that's why I think there is quite a bit of interest in soils, because soils is considered a significant opportunity to sequester emissions in a sustainable way that can also produce a number of additional benefits. And that is the market, particularly for carbon offsets, is interested, I think, in those types of benefits. To better understand where the lay of the land for these types of credits and offset opportunities, and how countries may be able to better encourage certain carbon market development opportunities focused on agriculture and land use, FAO did do a review in 2022, and that's informed a lot of activity that we're now undertaking this year. So I'll finish off my presentation just to give you a quick run through, an overview of this review and what it might say about the opportunities and challenges moving forward. We looked at a number of standards, specifically at methodologies related to agriculture and land use coming out of these voluntary and the compliance market standards. For this presentation, I'll just focus on a few. And basically a systematic review looking at differences in procedure requirements with respect to setting of baselines. So there is a lot of similarity, for example, across the baselines when baselines reset in the number of years required. You know, the technical requirements for setting the baseline. I think what we were trying to do with this review was really to see you know, what were the common points and what maybe some of the key differences across the different crediting approaches, you know, where there was areas perhaps to understand better, you know, why a certain approach has been adopted, you know, what might be the additional benefit of say, different types of baseline setting approaches to others. Similar concerns or interests in terms of, say, the approach to additionality that the different crediting mechanisms have been using. Of course, for offsets, for issuance of credits, you know, it's in a requirement that it can be demonstrated that this activity is an additional activity, that it's not something that has been long planned. And there's a different standards across the different crediting mechanisms to demonstrate that it's an additional activity, something, an emissions reduction activity that would not have occurred without the incentive provided by the carbon offset mechanism. I think a big issue in agriculture and land use is with respect to permanence. And, you know, of course, in an agricultural context where it's very common for, you know, we may have land set aside for a number of years, but you know, it's common for land use to change in relatively short time spans. This can have issues for the permanence of the emissions reductions achieved. And also, you know, each of the crediting mechanisms has a slightly different approach to how to reflect this in the crediting mechanism. I suppose here, you know, I think at the moment, you'll see in a minute, we'll go through the different subsectoral approaches and the levels of readiness. And you'll see that, you know, where permanence is a particular issue, for example, in field crops, or measures targeting, for example, soil carbon sequestration, there is less experience, and to some extent that is to do, I think, with issues regarding to how to factor in and manage issues related to permanence, and then also leakage. So being able to demonstrate that, you know, an offsetting activity in one jurisdiction is not leading to, you know, pushing emissions generating activities to another jurisdiction, so to another country, for example. And there's different ways to prove this as well. Not all mechanisms address leakage at this stage. So then, based on that sort of initial review of the different standards, we looked at specific methodologies relevant to the agriculture and land use sectors. Unsurprisingly, you know, we were finding that forestry, there's a number of ready examples, not necessarily in the compliance market, but definitely in the voluntary market. So there's already a very good level of readiness and understanding of how to develop forestry offset projects. Livestock, a little bit more so than say agriculture. And we did identify a number of barriers for soil organic carbon projects, for example. And then fisheries, basically very, very low levels of experience and no methodologies at the time we did the review. But this is, of course, a dynamic space, and there has been some developments. So I'm a little bit, Lucrecia, am I already over time? I'm over time.
Well, you can try to wrap up if you like.
Okay.
But you have a few more minutes, no problem.
Okay, I'll quickly wrap up here. Maybe just to focus on a few points. In livestock there is quite a bit of experience, but it tends to be in the manure management space, particularly around the development of biogas projects. So anaerobic digestion of animal waste. There are a number of examples of offset projects, biogas offset projects, capturing, reducing methane emissions from ruminants. From management of manure. There is more limited experience with the direct sort of methane reduction from the animals themselves, but there are some examples that that may be applicable in the future. With specific feed practices, for example. But at the time we were doing this review, not really many at scale or at a large number. In terms of agriculture as well, here, like we're talking here about field crops, there's a relatively low level of experience. There were a few, for example, rice has been attracting a lot of attention lately. At the time we did the review, there was just one CDM methodology applicable to rice. Since that time, there has been a number of developments in that sector. There are new methodologies either coming or soon to be coming from Vera and Gold Standard, and there is renewed interest from project developers to look at emissions reduction opportunities from the rice sector. In terms of soils, some of this was discussed in the session yesterday, but some of the barriers for soils are in terms of basically monitoring and verifying. So the spatial variability of soil carbon, some of the upfront costs, which is applicable across the board for agriculture sector projects, but particularly for those targeting soil carbon. High monitoring costs is also a significant issue, and of course issues around tenure. And I mentioned earlier permanence, so there is risks for soil carbon projects of very fast reversals should priorities for land use change. So these things are difficult to capture, and one reason why we felt that there's a very low level of readiness for these types of projects at this stage, but that can change very quickly. Of course, there are some developments that could show the way forward. The Australian example that they've, under their domestic emissions trading scheme, have made provision for soil carbon projects. They're documenting quite well some of the challenges that they're facing, and they may be applicable more broadly. So it's one to watch. Yeah, and then fisheries, I'll just say that there's really not much there at the moment. So possibly a space to look into more. Yeah, just finally, some key issues. What we have seen in the last few years is that there's a fair bit of uncertainty actually at the national level about how countries will balance the different carbon market segments moving forward. In some countries, there was a recent moratorium in the issuance of, say, voluntary carbon projects, or development, I should say, of voluntary carbon projects, to allow time for the government to think about how they would balance but potential new compliance market opportunities with the voluntary carbon market. So there is some uncertainty about how countries will move forward and how they will account for the different opportunities offered by the carbon market. In some countries, they have made unconditional contributions to reduce emissions from agriculture, and what we have seen is that also some countries are really focusing on making sure that they can meet those unconditional contributions by the end of the commitment period of the Paris Agreement, which may be at the moment crowding out additional opportunities for reductions for other types of market segments. But this is a near-term thing, and I think countries are very quickly getting to grips and understanding where their emissions reductions will come from for unconditional contributions, and where they may be able to start issuing additional newer projects to target even further emissions reductions or sequestration opportunities. Yeah, I mentioned that new methodologies are being developed all the time. I mentioned the new rice methodologies. I also mentioned the biochar methodology, which has been receiving a lot of attention. And of course, Article 6, issues related to Article 6 are not finalized yet. So again, some uncertainty. From FAO's side, we are continuing our work on this topic. We have new studies coming out on voluntary carbon market and agricultural sectors, both at the global and the regional level. We have a new technical cooperation project where we're partnering with IGES and the UNFCCC Regional Centre to raise awareness and build capacity, particularly with compliance market, the developments in the compliance market, but also in that we'll be looking at relationships between compliance market and voluntary market opportunities for agriculture. So yeah, Lucrezia, I think that's it for me for the moment.
Many thanks, Bo. It was a very good and comprehensive presentation, a lot of information to digest for our participants. So before opening the floor for questions, we have an intervention from India. So today we have the pleasure to have Mr. Jat, Research Program Director of Resilient Farm and Food Systems at the International Crops Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, so ICRISAT. Mr. Jat has extensive experience working on carbon markets in India and is willing to share it with us today. So after his intervention, we will open the floor for questions. So regarding Mr. Jat's intervention, of course, but also the presentation that my colleague Bo just did. And therefore, I would like to give the floor to Director Jat. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, very well.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation and this opportunity. And it was so amazing to hear Bo's presentation, very, very comprehensive. And that provides greater insights into the carbon market or carbon financing. I think, he raised quite a few pertinent issues. And what we see is while, you were posing the questions to the audience, the four very, very important questions. Over past few years, I think we are, things are moving very, very rapidly in this space of the carbon markets. But I still see a lot of confusion, low level of understanding when we talk about carbon credits in agriculture. And if many of us might have gone through the recent some of the papers, some says there's a potential opportunity, there's somebody says no, somebody feels like when we talk about the carbon markets, it's like we are imposing something on the smallholder farmers. So I think that knowledge gap is a challenge and is an issue. What I see from agriculture's perspective in general and from the smallholder farmers' perspective in particular, I think this is a fantastic opportunity. If we can make a stronger case in terms of right way of the methodology, the tools, the monitoring, reporting, verification, and also the regulatory mechanism at the country level or the national, subnational level. That is something I think very, very important in this particular space. From the agriculture standpoint of view, and it's straightway, I think the voluntary carbon market, which provides excellent opportunity. So, for example, what FAO and others, the international or national organizations are pushing toward the sustainable agriculture practices. Bill, you mentioned about the focus on the adaptation. But what I see is the mitigation co-benefit of the adaptation. If we don't quantify, I think there is no way we can incentivize. And that incentivization mechanism can bring a pull factor for adoption of sustainable practices. So from that perspective, it's a win-win. I see, for example, India is moving fast, rapidly, and I think they recently, came up with these two carbon notifications. One is on the carbon credit, other is on the green credit. So that's another one. And if we talk about the carbon, I think we also need to understand what is the volume, where are the opportunities, because we have to make a business model. There's a private sector and others involved who are in the carbon marketplace. They are looking at the business. So the clearly delineated hotspots where we see the opportunity for mitigation and the carbon credits. So that need to be defined. But I think everywhere we not have opportunity for the carbon credits. Of course, we can, for example, low input and low intensity areas where we want to increase the productivity. That means the input use may go up and there may not be any opportunity for the carbon credit per se. Carbon emission intensity may go down, but the carbon credit. That's where I think I see the new credits, which are like a nature credits. I think Vera and others have that already, and there is a market for the nature credit. So from that perspective, I think the ecosystem services, so quantification and valuation of the ecosystem services is something very, very important to complement the carbon markets and bring together another opportunity for incentivization to the farmers in the low emission development or low emission practices. What I see is in terms of and Bill, you mentioned about the cost effective mitigation opportunities, and a couple of years back we did an analysis, for example, in India, in agriculture, with different sector, livestock or the crops and different provinces, and we see a lot of opportunity for negative cost mitigation. That means you are saving on the cost and you are mitigating. And those are the kind of low-hanging fruits I think we need to harness on. But a comprehensive definition, a comprehensive protocol, method, tool, that harmonization across the players who are engaged in the carbon markets. I see many people are on this stream, and everybody is using different methods, ways, and different level of understanding. So that harmonization should be the first priority, so that everybody is on the same frequency and they don't confuse people, they don't confuse the policymakers. That's something, and from that perspective, I see this webinar very, very important. And I think something which is, as output of this webinar, if you can put something on the broader level of the understanding so that everybody is on the same frequency. As I said, long way to go, but this is very, very exciting field. And I think it's important from the perspective of agriculture, of the smallholder farmers and the society and the environment. Last night, I was reading the Oxfam report, which just came out, indicating that 1% of the richest people globally are contributing to 16% of the greenhouse gas emissions, which is equivalent to 66% marginal people. So I think we need to look at those and see how the carbon credit or the incentives coming from those 1% can go to those 66% and making a balance, which is helping everyone. So these are some of my points, but we'll be happy to respond if there is any query. I'll be available. But thank you so much for this opportunity. We at ICRISAT been working, on these aspects over years, and through public sector or private sector. But we are primarily focusing on the vulnerable areas, the dry lands, the low intensity, the low input agriculture. Still, we want that farmers should be benefited out of the ecosystem services. And that's what the dimension I think we can bring, because if you talk about across the world, the 50% area is still dry land, and 75% or 70% area is the low input or agriculture. We may not see a lot of opportunity for the carbon credit, but I think we can see a lot of opportunity for the nature credit. So I think that's something very, very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director Jet, and many thanks for your intervention. Actually, we have a question in the screen, well, in the chat box that might relate to the last part of your intervention. It's from India, as far as I see. And the question is how much time it will take to monitor the soil organic carbon from the adoption of the different practices in particular season. Actually, you were not with us yesterday, but there were some quite some question again from India also in relation to the rice cultivation. Do you have an opinion on this? We cannot hear you, huh?
Yeah, so yeah, good question. It depends how much time means at what scale you monitor. There are different methods. When we talk about the carbon financing, we have to use the standard processes which are accepted by the carbon market. For example, Vera or Gold Standard or whosoever. So those standard methods are to be used, and they take their own time. But I think there's a lot of work going on how to speed up the carbon monitoring using the geospatial tools. And if you go with the geospatial tools and standardize those, I think that can take a little time than what we see the wet chemistry, take the samples and analyze them in the laboratory.
Thank you very much. And that will bring you right to the next presentation that is from Vera. Meanwhile, I would like to, well, I don't know if you can stay with us. I hope so. If so, can you please keep an eye again in the chat and then in the question and answer box, because very often questions come in as the webinar is progressing. And I would like to make the same request also to Bo, that has been very active already to share information and answer questions in the chat box. Said that, as I said, you also introduced a bit the topic that we are about to touch with our next speaker, that is Miss Carolina Cardoso Lisboa. She works as manager for agriculture innovations at the Program Development and Innovation Department of Verra, that is the world's leading voluntary carbon market program. Ms. Cardoso, the floor is yours, and I will share the presentation for you as requested. Just give me a second. I hope that you can see.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much, Lucrecia. So, good afternoon to all of you, or good morning or good evening, wherever you are. I want to start by thanking the organizers for this great invitation and opportunity what was given to Vera to hold this presentation here today and introduce our verified carbon stand program. My name is Carolina Lisboa. I joined Vera in the beginning of this year, and I work in the Program Development Innovation Department, more specifically in the Agricultural Innovation team. So most of our work in our team is supporting and reviewing the VCS agri-related methodologies and looking also for new opportunities for the agricultural sector in the carbon market. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. Today, here in this slide, you can just see like a summary about what I'm going to speak about today. I will just give a short introduction to Vera, and then a short introduction to the Verified Carbon Standard program. Then we move to an overview of the VCS methodology specifically for soil organic carbon quantification, and then we finish with sections of questions if the time allows. Next slide, please. So let's start then with the introduction to Vera. I'm going to speak about, give you an overview of the organization, its history and the standards. Next slide, please. So as you see here, Vera was founded in 2007 by environmental and business leaders who saw the need for a greater quality assurance in the voluntary carbon markets. Vera is a non-profit organization setting up standards for climate action. It's actually it's based in the US, but we are operating globally. Vera is growing quite rapidly, and today we are more than 100 employees. I think, if I'm not wrong, we are actually about to reach 200 employees, and we're still growing quite rapidly, as I said, as the market also is evolving quite fast, as my colleagues just mentioned before me. Next slide, please. So as I said, Vera builds standards for different project types and activities, such as reducing deforestation, improving agricultural practices, addressing plastic or food waste, and achieving gender equality. What you see here in these slides are the current Vera standards or programs that we manage to certify that project activities achieve measurable high-impact outcomes. Today, we're going to speak about the verified carbon standard, but I just want to briefly mention that we have also the plastic and waste reduction standard, which is the newest standard that we have in Vera. We have also the climate, community, and biodiversity standards, which is also quite popular, the CCB. And we have the SD Vista, the Sustainable Development Verified Impact Standard, and the Jurisdictional and Nested RED Plus. Today, I'm going to focus in the verified carbon standards. Next slide, please. The verified carbon standard is the world's most widely used voluntary greenhouse gas program. Next slide, please. Here's just to give you the feeling of our impact in terms of in the market. We see here, like, we have nowadays verified more than 1 billion VCUs. VCUs is the shortening for verified carbon units. We have now in our register more than 2,000 projects around the world in about 88 countries are already using and applying our standards in their projects. What you see here to the right, just recently, Vera again earned 2 prestigious environmental finance awards this year. We again earned the award for the best greenhouse gas credit program for the verified standard program, and also the award for the best register provider for the Vera registry. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to speak a little bit how it works in a nutshell. So the VCS standards set up the rules and requirements that all projects must follow in order to be registered and issue those verified carbon units. The VCS standard has mainly 3 components. The first one is the accounting methodologies. The accounting methodology set out the details and procedures and pre-reviewed emission reductions formulas for quantifying the greenhouse gas benefits of a project. Each methodology covers a specific set of activities for a distinctive project type. The next component is the independent auditing. The VCS program projects, they are all subjected to independent auditing by Vera staff and qualified third parties, what we call the VVBs. This ensures that the project meets the standards, rules, and requirements, and ensuring that the methodologies are properly applied in the projects. And the last component is our Vera registry system. All the informations related to the VCS projects are stored and are publicly available in the registry system. The Vera registry also tracks the generation and the retirement of all VCUs, the verified carbon units. Next slide, please. In this slide here, I just want to give you a breath of how, what to do to develop a VCS project. We have several steps. Here it's a long process, but here it's just, as I said, just a brief summary of how to do it. So you start by picking a methodology, and then you write down a project description using our templates, which is also, I forgot to mention, all those documents are available in our Vera website. We have a number of the methodologies, the VCS rules and standards, as well as the templates that we use for the registration of a project. So you submit a project description, and then after that submission, you request a project to be listed on Vera registry. Then after that, the project undergo a 30 days public comment period. Then move forward to contract an independent auditor to ensure initial project design are valid. We call this here the validation step when you contract a VVB to check your project if it's comply with the VCS rules and also following the methodologies. And then you implement your project activities. Then after that, after some time, you contact again the VVB to where they're gonna verify that your project emissions reductions are real. That calls the verification step here. And then if you pass this auditing process, then you can then issue your carbon credits, which can be then sold in the carbon market. Next step, slide, please. So now I'm going to speak a little bit about the VCS methodology for soil organic carbon quantifications, which is the current opportunity for the credit agricultural emissions reductions and removal activities on the VCS. Next slide, please. So before I go specifically to the soil organic carbon methodology, I just want to give you an overview of the current available methodology for the agricultural sector, what we call the agricultural land management methodology, the sector, which is part of the sector 14 in our VCS sectoral scope. We have the VM22, which is about fertilizer and nitrogen fertilizer management. I want to say that this methodology was originally and up to date applied only to the US, but we are currently reviewing this methodology to make this globally applicable. Watch out for what's coming next, and hopefully we possibly gonna have a new methodology by next year, not a new, but a revised methodology that can be globally applicable. We have also the VM26 and the VM32, which are the grassland management methodology. The VM41, which is specific for the livestock sector, it's about enteric methane emissions. The VM42, which I'm going to speak today, and this VM42 has a company document which is called the VMD. It's a module 53 for model calibration. We have also a relatively new methodology, the VM44, which is about biochar application, which possibly also soon gonna undergo a revision process to be updated. And as Bo mentioned before, there is a huge interest for the rice cultivation sector projects. And we inactivated this methodology in the beginning of this year, and we have started the development of a new methodology for the rice projects. So now I'm going to move to the VM42 and explain a little bit what we have in this methodology. Next slide, please. Thank you. The VM42, it's called Methodology for Improved Agricultural Land Management. This methodology was launched some years ago, and this year we just launched the version 2.0. This methodology has a global geographical scope. It's applicable for crop and grazelands. The project activities on this methodology focused on the increase of management, on the implementation of management practices that increase soil organic carbon stocks, and can also, it's also applicable for reductions in CO2, N2O, and CH4 emissions. I just mentioned that to say that those other gases are optional, but the main focus of this methodology is really to increase soil organic carbon stocks. Here you can see a short list of the eligible project activities, such cover cropping, crop rotations, reduced tillage, rotational grazing, improved fertilizer management, for example, if you want to plan emission reductions for N2O. So next slide, please. We have three quantification approaches in this methodology to quantify the greenhouse gas emission reduction and removal. The first one, it's now called measure and remeasure, using control sites for comparison. The second one is measurements and models. If you go for approach 2, then you're going to have to follow the VMD 53, the module for model calibration. And then we have a third approach, which is based on default factors. This methodology required periodic and direct soil organic carbon measurements. I want to emphasize here at this point, we are not yet using remote sense for quantification of soil changes on soil organic carbon stocks, but it's definitely something that we are having like a close look and would like to implement it as soon as the technology is ready to be implemented in the voluntary carbon market. But so far, this methodology does require field measurements in periodic basis. The additionality and baseline assessment, it's a project-based approach. That means it's not a standardized approach, it's case by case, depending on the project activity and the business as usual scenario. There are three main assessments that need to be done. The first one is the regulatory surplus, to verify if there is any law that already is supporting the implementation of new practices. The next one is the implementation barriers, where you assess the social barriers for implementation of a new practice, the economic barriers, for example, and so forth. And also the last one is you have to prove that it's a non-common practice, the new practice that you are proposing in your project. And you have to demonstrate that there is less than 20% of implementation of that specific practice in the region where you implement your project. And the last component here I want to briefly mention, it's the buffer pools. This buffer pools is related to to make this calculation, we have a tool which was recently revised and published called non-permanence risk analysis tool that is used for estimation of carbon credits to compensate for any future reversals, which was also briefly explained here. What does it mean in terms of the concern about soil organic carbon might have a very fast it might be not permanent and has a risk for reversals. Next slide, please. So the VMD 53, it's a module for model calibration, validation, and uncertainty guidance for the methodology for improving the agricultural land management. In this document, you're gonna find detailed guidance for projects that use a measure and model quantification approach, the approach 2 that I showed in the previous slides. This document provides procedures for model calibration, validation, and verification. It also provides a procedure for a standardized assessment of the model performance. And it also, after following this module, you're going to generate a model validation report for the evaluation of conformity with the VM42 and VMD53 requirements. This document, then, it's going to be used and accessed by an independent model expert that gonna give the VVP the certification or the proof that the model was used properly for the quantification of greenhouse gas emissions. So what you see here to the right is just a diagram of the steps when you use model for quantification in VM42 projects. It's a little bit busy slide, but I'm happy to share this slide later on. You can have a closer look, and you can also access the document, as I said before, going to our website. Next slide, please. So we strongly believe that the VM42, it's a powerful tool to unlock the potential of soil organic carbon. Today, we have in our registry 109 projects listed. That does not mean that they have completed the whole project yet. Most of these projects is still starting development, but there is a huge potential to have these projects helping in the climate action, in climate mitigation action. And yeah, this number is also quite increased quite rapidly since the beginning of this year. In the beginning of this year, I think this number basically doubled the number since from January to now, and it's still growing. So we also support the voluntary carbon market and believe that can help catalyze investment for the implementation of improved agricultural land management while promoting soil health, water conservation, biodiversity, and enhancing livelihoods. Here, we are very happy about that announcement that in October this year, we had the first project using the new version of the VM42 that is now certified. That means that it has undergone the VVB assessment, and it's already implemented the project activities. And yes, that's really good news. And there are also a few other projects undergoing validation, requesting registration, which is also very good. And hopefully soon we're gonna have these credits available in the voluntary carbon market. Next slide, please. So that's it for me. It's a lot of information, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions now or later on. You can just send your questions to info@fera.org, and we are very happy to interact with you and clarify any of your questions. The next slide, please. There. Thank you very much for your attention, and over to you, Lucrezia.
Many thanks, Carolina. It was a very good presentation. We already have one question in the chat box. Maybe I will read it for you. Are there any approved methodologies for the use of composting at a large scale?
No, there is no specific methodology for composting, if I understood correctly. But when you use composting, you are basically focused on the increase of soil organic carbon stocks. Theoretically, you could use the VM42 if your focus is to certify carbon removal in soils, not specifically for the use of composting, because it's just organic amendment.
Then I have maybe a couple of questions for you. The first one is how to engage with Verra. If a project or a country want to engage with you, where they should go on the website or who they should contact. And also, what would be the cost implied in getting your certification?
About the cost, you can go to our documentation's webpage in the Verra website. You go to Verra and then you go to resource. And then there you're going to find all the documentations, and there's a very detailed assessment of each step and how much it costs. But this is just about the Verra side, what a project might cost to use Verra methodology and to be registered in the Verra registry. But the costs vary greatly across the geography, because there are so many other variables to be taken into account in terms of project implementation itself. I would not have like a number in mind. Depend also of the size of the project, the cost of your activities, the cost for soil analysis and so forth. What was the question? I forgot.
Yeah, well, how to engage with Verra and what are the costs implied. So, but my understanding is that your methodologies work a bit like an ISO. So like the users have to pay to access the methodology, right?
Yes, you have to pay not to access the methodology. The methodology is publicly available online. You can just take it, but to register and be verified by the third-party audits and to have the registration of your project. And then you have to follow the program. You have to prove and demonstrate that you follow the program rules and the requirements and properly apply the methodologies, the guidance in the methodologies. And of course, that has a cost. How to engage with Verra? Verra does not participate in the project development. Verra does provide the standards and the framework for the developer to implement the program or the standards. Of course, we engage not in a deep level, but of course, if you have any questions about the interpretation of the program rules and requirements or the guidance for the methodology, of course, we are more than happy to answer them. And yes, and then that's the type of engagement we have now with stakeholders. Or, for example, another type of engagement, actually, like all these methodologies and the VCS rules and requirements are constantly being revised. And we have this stakeholder, we have a period for public comment, public consultation, that any stakeholder can submit their feedback on the program and methodology, and we take that very seriously and look at very carefully to try to implement those feedbacks in our program. Yeah, that's one example how we interact with stakeholders.
Thank you very much. And do you also help projects or countries to get in touch with the buyers for the carbon credits?
No, we're not acting in the market. We just register, certify, and issue the certificates, but we don't negotiate the VCUs in the market.
Thank you very much. A last question that is also in the question and answer box and refer a bit also to the presentations that were provided yesterday by Joanna and Natalia. So what is your experience in Verra with the tools like Exact and RegSoil? Does anyone use them to apply for credits in union with your methodologies?
No, those tools, they are external tools, like the RegSoil is a program itself, which has their own standards and procedures and requirements. So then we have our own methodology, our own guidelines. The ex-ante, for example, as was said yesterday, it's more to have assessment of your potential benefit implementing a project. But in terms of we not use that tool, for example, to quantify, because we need a more detailed assessment of your actual gain or actual carbon removal or emission reduction in a project. And for that, we need really to use more advanced modeling approach and do, for example, the measurements. But it's still very helpful to use the ex-ante, for example, to have an idea for project investment in the investment decisions.
Thank you very much. Maybe just the last question, challenging question for you. Well, do you have any suggestion on how to create effective carbon financing mechanisms, especially in Asia? And do you know about carbon finance, any specific project and carbon financing mechanism in the region?
In Asia, there are several projects undergoing there. If you look in the very registry, you have so many projects there coming from India implement sustainable practice. And a good example is the rice projects. There are so many rice projects implementing sustainable practices as well. And yes, I would not name one, but there are many companies operating there and already implementing projects for the carbon market. I suggest you can access our website, go to the registry webpage, and have a look there on the current projects. You have all the information about the projects. Of course, it's a summary, but you can have an idea how it's done. And and who is doing that also, it's there. This information is found in the registry.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for your time and for your very good presentation.
Thank you.
So we are now getting to talk about carbon-rich soil amendments. As done earlier, let me ask you a few questions on the topic. I will launch a few polls. Give me a second. Poll number 1. I hope you can see it. What carbon-rich soil amendments do you know or have you heard about? This is a multiple choice question, so you can select as many as you like. On screen, we have compost, manure, cover crops, crop residues, biochar, peat moss, wood chips and sawdust, green waste compost, straw and hay, as an example. Let's see. Which ones do you know or have heard about at least? I will close the poll shortly, so please hurry up to inform us on your knowledge on these amendments. Okay, I'm ending the poll now and sharing the results. So the most known one is compost, followed by biochar and by manure. Now, let me ask another question. The possible answers are still the same, but the nature of the question is different. So the question now is the following: what carbon-rich soil amendments are most promoted or used in your country? You have the same possible answers as earlier. So we have compost, manure, cover crops, crop residues, biochar, peat moss, wood chips and sawdust, green waste compost, straw and hay. Meanwhile, Carolina, I see there is another question for you in the chat box. If you can please have a look at it. Meanwhile, I'm closing the poll and sharing the results. So this time we see that the mostly promoted or used carbon-rich soil amendments are compost again, manure, and crop residues. Last question for you. It's coming, eh? The possible answer are still the same. Okay, but now it really looks at your field of expertise. What soil carbon-rich amendments do you usually work with? Compost, manure, cover crops, crop residues, biochar, peat moss, wood chips and sawdust, green waste compost, straw, and hay. I will close the poll shortly. Please hurry up to express your preferences. Okay, most of you works with compost, manure, and then at the same level, cover crops and crop residues. But we also have a few people working on biochar, which is very good because the next presentation is actually about biochar. So today we will look into biochar, that is a carbon-rich soil amendment that is acquiring increasing recognition and interest worldwide. And for doing so, we have Mr. Natapol Chitamart from the Kasetsart University in Thailand, who will tell us about the work of his office on the topic. So, Mr. Natapol, the floor is yours.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Lucretius, for introductions, and good afternoon from Thailand. And so for the topic, so today I'm just got the invitation from the organization. So, but the topic is not quite related to the biochar, but I will provide you the topic related to the organic fertilizer and also the residues, right? So may I share my slide? Okay, can you see the slide now?
No, we could see it for like 1 second and then they disappeared. Now we can see your screen, but not in presentation mode.
Okay.
Yes, perfect. Thanks.
Okay, so I like to share some information from Thailand. So I am Natapol Chitamat from Department of Soil Science and from Faculty of Agriculture, Kasetsart University. So the topics and also the poll that everyone just gives us the results is maybe not related to the biochar, but today I'm gonna show you some information and interesting information that we would like to deal with. How can we improve the agricultural land, and also how to use the biogenic carbon to improve the soil carbon sequestration in agricultural land. So just give you the information about Thailand. So actually the greenhouse gas emissions inventory that we reported to the UNCCC. So actually the in the agricultural sector, the GSG emission is just from the rice cultivations, and so maybe more than 50% of the greenhouse gas emission from the agricultural production in country. And also most of the greenhouse gas emission is just from the managed land. For example, the use of the chemical fertilizer, urea, and also the organic fertilizer. So this is related to the land management. So the question is how can we reduce the greenhouse gas emission from this from this sector? So that give me to that make me interested to this topic. So actually, when you say this slide, so we know that the greenhouse gas emission inventories actually the report, some report of the inventories, they include like a land use and land use change to the inventory. But some of the report they omit of this because of because of the forest, and also the cropland is have high potential to draw back the carbon dioxide, and also store in the ecosystem, or store in the land. So you see, this is information from Thailand. In the forest land and forest area, the carbon stock or carbon removal from this sector is about 25 gigagram carbon dioxide equivalent, and for the cropland and remaining cropland is more than forest area is about 76 thousand gigagram carbon dioxide that's stored in this area. But if we change the land use, it maybe emit the GSG emission. For example, is the land is converted to the croplands, maybe emit from the 9,000 gigagram of carbon dioxide equivalent. So here I'm just to focus how the biomass, and also how the output or output from the agricultural land can be used as a tool to remove the carbon dioxide from this sector. So that is the problem that we focus on the biogenic carbon. So the biogenic carbon, we used to we like to know how much of the carbon stored in the biomass, and then we can use this biomass to be to produce like a compost or others raw materials. For example, the biochar we can use to be raw material to produce. But in the natural level, we don't have the information of this biomass produced from the agricultural land. So let me talk about the biogenic carbon. So actually the biogenic carbon is produced from the photosynthesis and stored in terms of the organic substances in the plant tissue. So, and then after we harvest the yields, so biogenic carbon is also remaining in the land areas, like as a crop residue. So this is a lot of portion that we have to deal with, especially in Thailand, because of we have a lot of the biomass, and also many kinds of the economic crops to produce in the land. So in my study, I just collect the data from the national yield from in three major economic crops and major field crops in Thailand. So I'm focused on the rice, maize, and sugarcane. So I'm collect the data from 2017 to 2021, 2021. So 5 years of the information that we collect from the national data from the so we call this an Office of Agricultural Economics and the Office of the Cane and Sugar Board. So collect this information to estimate the how much of the carbon stored in the land area. So the methodology that we use to estimate the crop residues, we use the harvesting index that to estimate the crop residue. So actually, I use the harvesting index for rice is 0.5, and for the maize is 0.443, and for maize is the for sugarcane is a 0.027. So to calculate the crop residues from the harvesting index information, so we got the crop residues megagram per hectare, and then we estimate. We use this information to estimate the carbon storage in the field residues by equation. Carbon storage in biomass is equal to the crop residue or dry matter multiplied by the carbon fractions. And for the carbon fraction in this study, we use for the rice, we use the 0.4882, and for the maize it's a 0.33, and for the sugarcane it's 0.5769. So it's we used to add the factor to calculate the carbon storage in biomass, and then we got the carbon storage number, and then we convert the carbon storage in the residue into the carbon dioxide, biogenic carbon dioxide, by multiply by the 44 and divided by 12 to convert to the carbon to the carbon dioxide. So, and then we estimate the net carbon balance. So we just use the carbon source or emissions, and also carbon sink. And for the carbon sink, we use the information from this estimation to estimate the carbon capture in the agricultural land area. So for the result that we collect the data, so for the this figure, we show the total rice output from the 2017 to the 2021. So the rice production in the average rice production of Thailand is about 31.8 or roughly 32 million tons of the rice grain yields, and then we estimate or equal to the 6.61 ton per hectare. And for the maize, the average total maize yield range from 4.5 to 5.1 million tons. For the 5-year average maize yield is of the 4.9 million tons, or equal to the 4.41 ton per hectare. For the sugar cane, the cane yield is range from 79 to 136 million tons. 5 years is about the 107 million ton, and with the average yield, the average yield per hectare is the 58 ton per hectare. So this information is very important to estimate the carbon stock and carbon turnover into the soils. So for the estimate the carbon capture as the biogenic carbon in biomass in the major field crops of Thailand. So the carbon stock in the rice straw is and with a very high carbon content is about 15.5 million tons of the carbon stored in Thailand. And for the maize stover residue is an average is about 2.12 million tons of the carbon. And for the sugarcane is about 168 million tons of the carbon. And then we convert to the biogenic carbon is equal to an average amount is that 57 million tons of the equivalent carbon dioxide. And for the maize residue is about 7.8 million tons of the carbon dioxide. And for the sugarcane is about 615 million tons of the biogenic carbon. So then we use this data to estimate the net carbon balance in the system. So we use the biogenic carbon to estimate the net carbon dioxide emission in the system. So for the rice, we use the average number, and for the maize, also use the average number, and then we calculate the biogenic carbon per hectare is equal for rice is equal 11 and 7 and also 331 for sugarcane respectively. And for the greenhouse gas emission, we use the inventory data that reported to the UNCCD to estimate how biogenic carbon can mitigate and also can offset the greenhouse gas emission. So we use these two numbers to the difference between the sink. This one we call sink. Oh, sorry. This one is we call the sink, and this one we call the source of the greenhouse gas emission. So the results show that the most three major field crops in Thailand is can remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere about 9 for rice and 6 for maize and 330 and 30 for the sugarcane. So this information give us the idea that how can we deal with the residue produced from the major field crop in Thailand. So the biogenic carbon derived from the major economics like rice, maize, and sugarcane hold a significant promise for a future net carbon accumulation by net carbon balance at the farm level. So I just talk about the farm level. So how can we manage this big of the carbon that capture from the atmosphere and then convert it to the soil. So for example, convert it to the biochar or convert it to compost or convert it to like a others form of the stabilized carbon and then it put to the into the soil. So for the next slide, I'm just going to show you the perspective for development from this idea. So we know that a lot of the biomass produced from the agricultural sector, but this carbon actually we leave it on the land, and we didn't manage properly. So we would like to manage this portion of the carbon and then turn it to the carbon stock, like a turnover process, and store in the soils. And also we would like to improve the cropping system to boost up the capacity to of the system to capture the biogenic carbon and store, and then turn into the soil's organic carbon. So, but we also care about the soil health and indicator, because of if we look back to the information, most of the hotspot of the greenhouse gas is related to the fertilizer, especially urea, and also maybe compost and other manuals. But if we reduce this kind of the chemical fertilizer, or the amount or usage of the fertilizer, is maybe effect of the crop productivity. So we have to optimize the how much that we can optimize or reduce the the fertilizer usage in the cropping system. So this is we also think about this. And but for the development, we have to have the best practice, like improve the management practice to enhance the biogenic carbon capture, and try to store into the soil. I mean, we don't have to remove of the crop residue in the agricultural land, and we have to optimize the crop residue portion as a soil amendment, and also to increase the soil organic carbon storage. And also we would like to improve the quality of biomass to improve the C/N ratio of the crop residue before incorporating into the soils, because of if we didn't manage of the crop residue and just incorporate to the soils, maybe a source of the greenhouse gas emission. So we have to think about how can we cut how can we reduce the carbon dioxide emit from the fermentation process or decomposition process after application into the soils. And we have to finding the best practice to stabilize the soil organic carbon that turn over to the soil from derived from the crop biomass. So this is not how to say that, it's not good technology to develop the how can we stabilize soil organic carbon. So the biochar is one of the options that we have to use in this approach, because of if we produce a lot of biomass, so but all of biomass easily to decompose and then emit to the atmosphere. So biochar is one of the option that we can include in the management practice. So, and for the others challenge, we have to develop the soil monitoring and reporting and verification tool in the agricultural land. For example, we have to use like a the right model to quantify the carbon stock in the system, and also quantify the greenhouse gas emission, because of this can address the leak of the carbon dioxide from the system that we align with the news or the best practice. So we have to have this tool to monitor. So I'm just I want to show you the best practice that we use in the rice production area in the northeast of Thailand. So we work with the livelihood project to livelihood venture to improve the cropping system. So we started with the identify the crop calendar of the farmer, and then we co-design with the farmer with the practice that they can implement in their field. So one of the approach that we use is the cover crop and also the crop residue implement into the cropping system, because of we would like to regenerate the soil health and also increase the carbon stock in the area. So, and another practice that we use to improve and also maybe affect the greenhouse gas emission reduction is to optimize the fertilizer use of the farmer. So we used the simply the very rapid the soil test kit that we produce from the Kasetsart University to implement and also teach them to use and to know the nutrient levels before they apply the fertilizer. This is give the farmer an information of how much of the fertilizer they can apply to the land. So in this project is quite successful because of most of the farmer can reduce the amounts of the fertilizer applying from the conventionals. So and also they can learn how to adapt, how to adopt the practice, and also how to use this approach to reduce their input cost, for example, for the fertilizer. So we can use this information, the reduction of the nitrogen and also other fertilizer uses can be calculated as the GSG emission, like Vera show us the nitrogen fertilizer management methodology. So and another that we use to improve the cropping system is that we use the site-specific nutrient management. So we got the data from the soil analysis, soil testing, and then we teach them how to formulate the right fertilizer grade, and also adjust the timing of the application of the fertilizer at the right time for the rice requirement. For example, we divided the fertilizer application into three times to prevent the nitrogen and also the fertilizer loss from the ecosystem. So this method and this methodology can improve like a crop yield and also reduce and also enhance the nutrient use efficiency in the production system. So here is the but I'm not sure, and this practice is that can be used as a methodology to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and also maybe can be used to be the tool for the greenhouse gas emission, and also improve like a ecosystem of the agricultural land. So I'm sorry for the information is not related to the biochar, but I'm just want to show you like how can we improve and use the implementation and related to the greenhouse gas emission, and also maybe can be converted as the carbon credit from the best practice and agricultural land management. Okay, thank you.
Many thanks, Mr. Natapoli. It was very interesting, although it was not strictly focused on biochar, but it was, as I said, very interesting. And indeed, there is already some question for you in the chat that I will read loud, and I will give you the opportunity to answer before closing the webinar. So, DOC can be leached in the soil, and under what circumstances?
Yeah, actually, the DOC is a dissolved organic carbon. So this portion of the carbon is the maybe the leak carbon. So we have to quantify them as well, because of in the process of decomposition they have like the resistant pools of the carbon, and also the dissolved organic carbon, and then we it's maybe not stored in the soil, but maybe leads to reach out from the soil profile.
Thank you. And can we use crop rotation to overcome rice paddy greenhouse gas emissions? And what about rice straw fires in this regard?
Yes, actually we can use the crop rotation to input in the cropping system, because of the crop rotation can also capture the carbon from the atmosphere, and then we can use them as the how to say use them as the soil amendment. I mean the residue from the crop rotation, so we can improve like a carbon stock in the system.
And what do you think about fires? I also had a question on fire. What would be your suggestion and strategies to tackle the fires that are happening on agricultural fields in the region and that are causing air pollution?
Yeah, this is also is the very big problem in Thailand as well, because of after the farmers harvest their yields, they just left the residue in the land, and then some is maybe occasional burning, maybe by themselves, or maybe by accident. So this I would say we have to encourage them to use the biomass remaining in the land by some methodology, for example, to produce the compost at the field scale. So and then we introduce them like a cover crop to the land to prevent the burning. So this is the approach that we would like to encourage them, and also recommended the farmer to adapt on this, and then they can use like the biomass as the fertilizer to reduce the input cost for the next cropping system.
And then in the chat, well, a while ago, there was a comment about the carbon credits and the poor farmers or small farmers. So let me bounce the question to you. Do you think that through all these practices and establishing carbon credits, we can really help the smallholder farmers to change their routine practices?
Actually, at the first time, it's maybe hard for the farmer, because of we introduce some new work for them, but we have to encourage them, like to work with them. How can we introduce? We just say this process is the co-design. So we have to talk to the farmer first, and then design the crop calendar, and then introduce the possible practice to the farmer. And then if they accept to how to say to implement our recommended practice, So then we have to work with them, and then after this, we also monitor every step of the farmer practice to monitor the change of the system. For example, yields and also the cost of the implementation. So we have to learn with them, and then after, in the final, they will accept the process and also the adaptation of the practices. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If you like, you can stop sharing your screen, and we will proceed with the closure of the webinar, as long as there is any other participants that feel like making a statement on the topic by raising their hands or by writing in the question and answer box.
Okay, so
I
sorry.
see a hand up. Yes. Sonia Barwitsky, I will allow you now to talk. Please, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning. Very interesting. Thank you very much. I wanted to ask, because we are also about to design a project in the Mekong River Delta, which is related to rice production. And I'm wondering if you have any experience, what kind of crops are particularly useful for the crop rotation. So, for example, we were looking into shrimp and also into lotus, but I'm curious to hear if you have made any other experiences or any like innovative ideas maybe that are not that obvious. Thank you.
Okay. So actually we use like we select the cover crops. So we use the sun hemp to implement in the cropping system. But you can use like a leguminous or peanut or mung bean or every crop that you can implement in the croppings or crop rotation, because of this kind of crop is can provide the nitrogen in the system, and then it maybe affect the nitrogen use after we test the soil during the site specific nutrient management in the periods of the fertilizer application. So you can decide it which one is the available and which one the tolerant to the soil type and also in the ecosystem. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Natapol, and I take this opportunity to thank also all the speakers that have been with us these days and have been sharing their experience. I thank also all of you that participated to this event. Many thanks. Please do not hesitate to contact us in case of question or need. All presentations will be shared by email, as well as the video recording of the webinar. So once again, thank you all, and I wish you a very good rest of your day.